recruiting wise, guys. We land Vodney Cleveland. Then we land Richard Wesley, the 5-star out of California, which has been comped to Kayvon Thibodeau out of California as the best edge since then. So really, really big get for Texas recruiting wise. Outstanding and definitely a surprise. Everyone was surprised by that commitment. I dropped the video breaking that news yesterday right here on the channel, so please go check this out. I'll run through some of these recruits, and then we'll talk about how you think their Texas is doing overall, Gerald, recruiting wise. So Kane Finley visited, Caden Prothro, the tight end, visited, Kiwi Brown, tight end, visited, John Turntine visited, Kendall Gerville, who has been, heavily favored to Texas from Florida, defensive lineman, would be a hell of a get. James Johnson, also defensive lineman, visiting Texas. Trenton Henderson, visiting Texas. Stud, right up there with Richard Wesley, defensive end. Tyler Atkinson, the number 1 linebacker in the country, visited Texas. Kosi Akapala, visited Texas, linebacker. Calvin Thomas, also linebacker, visited Texas. Chase Calicut, visited Texas. And defensive back, kind of does it all. Paris Melvin Jr. visited Texas. I only went with guys that have not committed to the University of Texas. We had about 6 or 7 guys that are committed that visited as well, but these are the uncommitted kids visiting Texas. What do you think about how Texas is handling recruiting, Gerald?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that they're doing it the wrong way or they're not having success. We've said it before on this channel. Like, I am already pretty convinced that this 2026 class is going to look a lot like the 2022 class, where you have a ton of focus on the trenches. And you see, like, Kenny Baker's trying to have it all done before July, and I respect it, right? That guy has a bunch of incredible talent. And I feel like a lot of Texas fans owe him an apology because everyone's like, who is Kenny Baker? And like, he came in and is just absolutely killing it this cycle. So landing a ton of priority targets there. Texas, I think we're almost at half of the number of committed players are in the trenches, whether offensive or defensive line. And that, to me, is how you win the SEC, regardless of anything else, regardless of all of the vaunted offense and the skill players. Again, I point back to the difference between Texas playing Arkansas when they were in the Big 12 and Texas coming in this last year and being able to compete in the SEC. Texas got a lot heavier in the trenches, got a lot better in the trenches, and they're really focused on that. I don't have any sources. I just kind of follow the message boards like everybody else, but it seems like Texas has done a lot to make itself available and put itself in really good position for those 2 priority tackles in the state, John Turntine and Felix Ojo, who visited last week. And I know he wasn't on the list, but you can't really talk about that without talking about the totality of it. And so I think you land both of those guys would be great. You even split those guys, and I think you're doing okay. Texas is doing really, really well. I said it on social media. I need Kane Finley to quit all this mess and just finally commit. We know you're going, dude. And I love that his dad is letting him enjoy the experience and go on all his visits. But just come on home, kid. Just come on, put the burnt orange on, and you know where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, I agree. I do think he ends up with Texas. He does have the commitment date of July 4th. So if it is during that time, the video will be dropped. These kids love to do July 4th now because there's 3 or 4 guys on here. We'll read them off to you in a little bit about when they're deciding to commit, and a lot of them are on July 4th. But I agree. Yeah. I think Kane Finley does end up at Texas. It sucks because it sounds like Jalen Lott isn't going to end up at Texas. I don't know where he's going to end up. That's kind of faded off a little bit, which does suck for the legacy because obviously James Lott played here, but it is what it is. He doesn't want to choose Texas most likely. But there's some guys trending, and there's some high-level guys trending. I mean, you land Richard Wesley, who, again, jumped in the pool with Dan Lanning and then decided to make a real splash landing at Texas. So, overall, really exciting times to land him, unexpected. And then you have someone like Trenton Henderson, who really wasn't on Texas's board 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, and then all of a sudden, it's starting to gain steam, and he's down to 3 guys. It's Florida, Texas, and I believe LSU. So, Texas is in this thing, and Texas can easily win this thing. We've actually, ever since Sark's been here, we've kind of beaten Florida and LSU when we've gone head-to-head with them. So I feel pretty good with that recruitment. Tyler Atkinson, some weird things have been going on with him. Some very weird things. He trains with Derek Johnson. That's kind of odd, especially when you're down in Texas. There's the Pivot Players Podcast or Players Pivot Podcast, the one with Ryan Clark, where I guess Fanatic Perspective, most Texas fans know him. If you don't, follow him on X, Twitter. He put a clip up of Tyler Atkinson being like, yeah, Texas is really close to winning a natty randomly when someone whispered something in his ear. So it's there's a lot of weird things. I think Texas is in a good position for him. And a month and a half ago, I wouldn't have said that because he didn't even have a visit scheduled, guys. I really thought Clemson was in the running there. or Georgia, I think Texas might be his number one now. So very, very fun times. And we'll see who we land. I'm pretty confident some of these guys, like John Turntine and Felix Ojo, I do think they end up at Texas. I think Texas could also or possibly add Malachi Lee. That's another one that commits this Friday, which would be very awesome. I mean, you land those three guys, we're talking about a class that's probably as good, if not better, than the 2022 class. Crazy to say. But overall, I'll ask you this question, Gerald. If you had to choose, you could guarantee yourself a recruit to commit to Texas, and it cannot be Felix Ojo because we know how we both feel about him. Who do you want?
Yeah, I think Tyler Atkinson is probably the one. I think, and he kind of comes in as a ready-made Anthony Hill replacement. Like, it's hard to replace a guy like Anthony Hill unless you have a kid like Tyler Atkinson in the wings. And so him being able to come in, be a day one difference maker, and I think he'll get to be a lot of what Anthony Hill was his freshman year, where Leon Galefau will probably be back and be kind of the more seasoned guy, the guy who's holding down the more larger responsibilities, where Atkinson can come in and just be a scud missile and come in and make plays. And so of those dudes, I think probably Atkinson is the one that jumps out to me the most, just because, and I'll be honest, the state of Texas doesn't put out a ton of elite linebackers. So having to go somewhere else and pick a kid like him, when you can land them, you have to land them.
No, I agree. Since you went with him, I'm going to go with Trenton Henderson. This guy is 6'5", 265, 270 pounds. He's kind of the difference, or he's kind of the same as Richard Wesley. I mean, you have two gigantic human beings coming off the edge, and it's kind of weird because Texas hasn't had that kind of mold. Like, Colin Simmons is a little smaller than both those guys. Weight wise, he's a lot smaller. And then Smith Orogbo, again, kind of a bendy guy. These guys are just big, dominant, physical football players that look like, hey, if this guy walked past her and I said, hey, this dude's in the NFL, you'd be like, oh, he is? I'm not surprised. He's huge. Because Richard Wesley is 17 years old and he's 6'5", 265 pounds. Trenton Henderson is 18 years old and he's 6'4", 265 pounds. So they're freaks of nature. And if you can have those type of guys in the trenches in the SEC, yes, sign me up.
Yeah, Chase Calicut's one that's trending away from Texas, I think, at this time, but he's another one that I'd love to have. Texas has done really well recruiting safeties, but being able to keep that, like, North Shore, Houston pipeline going, and an elite player like that would be nice. Texas has a bit of a luxury at safety because they recruited so well the last couple of cycles, but he's another one that I think if we're looking at guys from this group, and especially from this past weekend visit cycle, be nice to have.
No, 100%. So I'm going to name some of these guys. Commitment dates: Kane Finley, as mentioned before. The 4th, Kendall Gerville, who I think does end up at Texas. The 2nd, Bryce Perry Wright, who really good football player. I just don't think he ends up at Texas at this point. July 4th. Felix Ojo said, this isn't a commitment date, but was news, is going to come down to Texas versus Ohio State. Malachi Lee is the 27th, Friday. Chase Calicut is also the 27th, Friday. John Turntine is July 4th. Xavier Crowell, I don't think we land him, but he's the 26th. Xavier Griffin, who Griffin, we did not talk about. I think could end up at Texas as well as the 29th. Yeah. I think that comes down to Alabama and Texas. And then Jalen Lott, again, I think he's trending away, is July 8th. So I named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys, Gerald. How many of those does Texas land?
5 feels about like the right number. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5. I probably put myself out there too much. I think, of that grouping of guys that you have named, I can probably count 5 of them off the top of my head that I think are at least trending Texas at 7:30 p.m. on June 23rd. So that number feels right to me. And I think, and this is why I was like trying to be cautious last week. Texas lost on some big recruitments last week. It was just like, this time next week, you're going to feel fine. So chill. But I really do think Texas probably lands 4 or 5 of those guys.
No, I agree. I was going to say 4. So we are lockstep there. Like, I think Caden Finley ends up in the class. I think Malachi Lee, I think, honestly ends up in the class. I do. I think Texas is trending heavily there. I think Turntine ends up in the class. And then I think Xavier Griffin ends up in the class. So that's 4 guys out of the 9. And they're all really good football. Oh, Kendall Gerville. So actually, I do think 5 because I think he's actually the biggest lock of the group. So yeah, I guess
I was right. I was right.
You were right. But if it's 4, then I was right. Okay, that's how this works. We clip off the 5 of what I just said and just say 4.
Yeah. We'll have to discuss it in 3 weeks for our show in 3 weeks. Who was right? Somebody clip that.